What I have in my hand is a compact cinema camera featuring a cage-free design top handle with XLR inputs. It can shoot 4K up to 120 frames per second, 10-bit 422 in cinematic colors. This is the brand new Sony A7S III Mark II. Just kidding, it's called the FX3. Welcome back to another episode of The Vong Opinion. I'm your host, Jason Vong, and today we're going to be breaking down the FX3. What's it do, why it exists, what's similar, what's different from the other Cine and Alpha cameras, and more importantly, what it's like to actually use this camera. And the other important question that we're going to answer is, are you right for this camera? Because we always seem to ask, is this camera right for us? But no one ever asks, are we right for this camera? Alright, so let's start off with visual quality first. If you're already familiar with the A7S III recording specs, then you pretty much know what the FX3 is capable of. In that case, just enjoy the on-screen visuals. Shout out to my friend Joshua, he's our helicopter cinematographer on this flight. For the full 5-minute sample footage off of this camera during our flight, check out the link above. Now, the difference between the two cameras really lie in the overall user experience, which we'll get into right after this section. Like the A7S III, Sony is focused on giving users the best 4K recording capabilities. Earlier rumors have led people to believe that the FX3 could shoot 8K, but if it could, it would have been super awkward because the higher tier FX cameras are only capped at 4K. Now, this rumor spawned from the fact that the recent Alpha flagship camera, the A1, can shoot in 8K, but only in H.265 10-bit 420. It does not have all the 10-bit 422 all-interest stuff, which is arguably important recording specs to have in a cinema camera. So if they're gonna put in 8K in a cinema camera, they're just waiting so they can do it properly. Probably not in this generation of FX cameras though. But going back to Sony giving the best 4K quality, we have options for internal 10-bit 422 recording along with the all-eye 600 megabits per second for maximum quality. It's also capable of outputting 16-bit raw output via HDMI to an Atomos recorder. For frame rate, it can go up to 120 frames per second in 4K with audio and a slight 10% crop. There is no crop in the lower frame rates. It has 15 stops of dynamic range along with all the picture profiles, including Hybrid Log Gamma, S-Log 2 and 3, and the elusive Cinetone. Now, keep in mind, the Cinetone profile is not in the A7S III, at least not available at this time of recording. There has been a rumor about a firmware update for the A7S III coming soon for the Cinetone profile, but nothing official from Sony yet. But moving on, the FX3 does not have built-in NDs, which is kind of a bummer, but again, I think Sony is just waiting to be able to do it properly before implementing it in smaller bodies. They haven't quite found a way to have both IBIS and built-in variable NDs, so it looks like we'll have to wait a little bit longer. But yes, the FX3 has in-body image stabilization, something that the bigger FX cameras don't have, but also don't really need. Since they are bigger, handheld footage wouldn't be as jittery compared to shooting handheld with a smaller camera. Like the A7S III, you have the option to use active stabilization, which does crop in 10% of your footage, or standard stabilization with no crop. And yes, it does record gyro metadata, so you can use the free Catalyst browse software for optimal post-stabilization. And also, like the A7S III, you have all the crazy good subject tracking autofocus. Now, one of the biggest critiques that the FX6 had was the touch tracking autofocus. Now, I don't know if they ever solved that on the FX6, but because the FX3 uses the same Alpha UI, it not only has the new menu system that the A7S III uses and the touch functionality as well, but also the easy access to touch tracking autofocus. So, yay. Pretty much A7S III in FX form, but also not pretty much. Here comes the difference. Let's start off with the cage-free design. Anytime I say cage-free, I just feel like I'm talking about eggs. Comes from cage-free, free-range chickens, from farm to table. From factory to Gimbo. But yes, if you're in the cinematography field or mid to high-end video productions, chances are you've probably rigged up your A7S in a cage with a monitor, a top handle, a couple of magic arms, lights, mics, whatever. With the FX3, you might not need a cage. Emphasis on the might. It comes with 5 1/4-inch 20 holes, 6 if you count the default bottom one, but there's 3 on the top and 1 on either side of the camera. So it opens up a bit of extra possibilities of rigging up the camera without having to install a cage. For example, my friend Tam here, amazing talented filmmaker, he has this intense suction cup of a car mount, and we put it on the hood of my car and we mounted the camera vertically. Look, it's 2021, alright? Vertical videos have been a thing for the last several years. Get with the times, old man. Anyways, I know this doesn't really seem like much, but it does really save a lot of time and it saves a lot of weight. I personally have always found cages to be very bulky. I don't really like using them, but that's because I do more run and gun video style shoots than I do actual production house sets where you actually have the time to set everything up. So being nimble and being able to set up and strike down quickly are far more important to me. Whereas for someone like my friend Tam here, who does the actual production house stuff, this might not have enough holes for him. He likes to build up his setup on set, and knowing companies like SmallRig, they will have a cage for this camera as well. But this cage's design is appealing to someone like me who doesn't want to bulk up the form factor, but still can take advantage of the extra holes. What I'm trying to say is it's easily adaptable. Now the top handle here mounts on top of the hot shoe and screws onto the adjacent holes for extra security. Not only do I have an XLR audio interface, but also a comfortable grip on the camera. And boy, let me tell you, it's really nice to shoot handheld videos like this. If you've been following my channel for a while now, you know that anytime I talk about these big heavy zoom lenses like Sigma or G Master 24-70, I'm like, yeah, they're great, but it's big. But when mounted like this on an FX3 with a top handle, it's comfortable. You know, I don't get as fatigued as quickly as holding a setup with a top handle compared to holding something like this. Because when I'm not shooting and I need to rest, I can let the setup dangle on the handle right here and the weight is nicely distributed on a setup like that. Whereas if I were to use the A7C or the A7S III, and when I need to like let it dangle on my side right here, the front heaviness of the lens would drag me down. I feel like I have to exert more energy just trying to keep it up. Even with a 70-200 G Master f2.8 with this handle, it's great. I want to go as far as to say this might be the sole reason why I would ditch my A7S III and get this instead. But there are things about the A7S III that I value a little bit more over the FX3. And yes, I know a cage with a top handle would solve this for the A7S III as well. But again, it's the cageless design, minimal setup time that makes the FX3 more appealing. So the detachable top handle doubles as an XLR audio interface, and it takes advantage of the multi-interface hot shoe on Sony cameras. And it functions exactly like the $600 XLR K3M audio adapter, which gives us 2 XLR inputs and one 3.5mm mic jack. Except I believe the top handle version does not come with a shotgun mic like the $600 kit. At least not at this price point, but you don't have to use the handle if you don't want to, if you plan on rigging it differently. The camera still has a 3.5mm mic jack on the side along with the headphone port, full-size HDMI, USB-C 3.2 power delivery, and USB multi-port. Aside from that, a couple of potential issues for some folks. As solid as it seems, just a fair warning, the handle does feel plasticky, so I would try to be careful not to drop this. And the other thing, I like to think companies like SmallRig would probably come out with a sturdier grip that will mount onto this camera if you need one, but do keep in mind, you might lose out on the XLR audio interface if you use a different handle. Now, just a quick note, you can get this $600 adapter for the FX3 as well as your other A7 cameras to gain access to the XLR inputs because it takes advantage of the multi-interface hot shoe technology. Let's go ahead and move on to ergonomics. So confirming right now, it uses the FZ100 batteries, the same type that the A7 camera uses. Grip-wise, I want to say it's similar to the recent Alpha cameras, but there's a little more squeeze on the FX. However, the button layout got completely tossed around. So if you're coming from Alpha cameras like me, it's gonna throw you off. As you can see, the labels are more video oriented. We got terms like zebra, peaking, iris, etc. Instead of the C1, C2, and so on, it's buttons 1 and 2 and so on with a very specific label. white balance, ISO, record, focus magnifier. So even though you can change them like you could for the custom buttons on the alpha cameras and make them do different things, you probably don't want to do that to avoid confusion, especially if you're not the only person that's going to be using this camera in your team. The on and off button is now located on the left, not near the shutter like it is on the A7 cameras. However, in place of that, they put the TW zoom rocker. Now, this is obviously for the power zoom Cine lenses, like the ones that they're starting to roll out. But if you have the regular Sony lenses, you can reprogram this to do clear image zoom instead. Moving on, the joystick is also located elsewhere. It's on the top now, which makes a lot of sense. You're likely going to be shooting video at chest level. Your thumb's going to rest where the joystick is so you can easily move your focus point around. But if you don't want to do that, the LCD does support touch focus as well. There are also multiple record buttons, so any position that you're holding it, you have easy access to pushing the record button. And what's nice is that there are ample amount of indicators around the camera that visually alerts you that you are rolling. Moving on, like the A7S III, it supports dual SD card slots or dual CF Type A express cards, but unlike the A7S III, it has a fan built in for better heat dissipation. Not that the A7S III had trouble doing long periods of 4K recording, but because that is a hybrid photo and video camera, it wasn't exactly built for long recording. Long recording as in, I don't know, 3+ hours. I personally haven't had to do more than an hour of continuous recording for a lot of my stuff, so A7S III is plenty for me, and it's proven to at least go on for a good couple of hours. But with the fan, the FX3 remained relatively cool throughout my 2.5-hour test. The A7S III was mildly warm to touch because I was using it to record the back of the FX3 screen so I don't miss anything. But there's that difference right there, right? I feel like if we were to push both cameras for hours on end, the FX3 would have smoked the A7S III. Not literally, of course. Now, during this test, I believe I have the fan on auto, so the fan definitely was activated during the recording. You do have the option to have it off during recording or have it turned on only when it's on standby. But even with the fan on, it's quiet. I probably wouldn't have noticed that it was on if I didn't hover my hand over the fan. So, pretty neat. I'd still be mindful if we are recording room tones though. And yes, it has a floppy screen. Anyways, who is this camera for? Ultimately, people who are already in the cinematography business or who wants to get into it. For someone who's looking to upgrade to their first big boy cinema camera, the FX3 would be a nice start. As we've seen in this video, it has everything someone needs to get started at a fairly decent price. And it could also benefit someone who's been in the business for a long time. For example, people who already have the bigger FX9 or FX6 cameras, they might find the FX3 appealing because of its more mobile and nimble FX form factor. Bruh, you know what this is gonna be for, alright? This is gonna be some Power Ranger Mega Robozord shiz, you know? They're gonna drop their drone Zord, the Air Peak, and the camera is gonna dock super easily on it, alright? It's gonna take flight, get some epic full-frame drone footage. Personally, for me though, I like to get my other Power Rangers and we just board the helicopter Zord and we just use the gimbal and get our drone footage that way. But that's just me. Or simply just use it as a discreet guerrilla style shooting cam so you don't actually get in trouble when you don't have a permit shooting outside. I do not endorse this. And that's because the FX3 has all the picture profiles to match up with those cameras, including the brand new Cinetone. Now, if you're not familiar with Cinetone, it's not exactly Venice color science, but it's Venice-like. So it will have the skin tones and the overall colors that filmmakers generally enjoy. It's supposed to look really good straight out of camera, very cinematic. And during the briefing, I had a really clear explanation from a Sony rep regarding the different picture profiles. Hybrid lock gamma is used to maximize your dynamic range. S-lock exists to match with other cameras in case you shoot with multiple different cameras. And Cinetone is just great straight out of camera look for the cinematic expression. Now with Cinetone, the way that you expose it is just based on your preference. Overexposing it a little will give a slightly washed out look, whereas underexposing will give your footage a bit more punchy contrast. Now I've grown to love this profile ever since I started using it on the A1, and I think it looks amazing. And this is where it differs from the A7S III. Again, it's super unclear whether or not the A7S III will get a firmware update to get the Cinetone, but I still have my fingers crossed though. But even if it never comes to the A7S III, it personally wouldn't bother me all that much. I love the standard no picture profile, and I've been shooting that for years now, and it's only gotten better. And I've also been enjoying S-Log3 a lot now that we have 10-bit 422, but for some folks, this picture profile can be the ultimate deciding factor in choosing this over the A7S III. Alright, so let's quickly talk about low light. I'm already blown away with how good the low light performance is off of the S3. So the FX3, equally as mind-blown. It is similar at each step of the high ISO range. At this point now, it's just really about choosing how you want to shoot. Which brings us to price. $3,900 US, and I think the pre-order should be out soon, but the camera will be available to the market on March 2nd, 2021. And I know I'm going to get a lot of questions. People are going to be asking me, well, what's going to be the better buy? The A7S III or the FX3? $3,500 versus $3,900. Now, while the FX3 seems more expensive, do keep in mind it does come with a $600 XLR audio adapter. Well, without the mic, it's really maybe like $300 to $450. But still, if you were to get that audio adapter with the A7S III, that would run you about $4,100. And that's not including the top handle and the cage that you might have to get for the A7S III if you want to rig it up. And that would probably run you at least $50 to $100, depending on which cage company you decide to buy from. But all of that is kind of sort of included already with the FX3 at the $3,900 price tag. With that said, I think I'd be doing you a disservice as a bargain hunter if I didn't tell you that I've been seeing the A7S III climbing down to as low as $3,150. I wouldn't be surprised to see the A7S III being a flat $3,000 by the end of 2021. So I'll say this, if you're after a good deal and you're not planning on rigging up the A7S III, you do a bit of photography as well, because yes, 12 megapixels is more than good enough for photography, get the A7S III. From a hybrid perspective, having the EVF is nice whether it's for photos or for videos, especially shooting out in high noon in the beating hot sun. And if you have other alpha cameras like the A1, A7 III, A7R4, the buttons are similar across the cameras that you can sync up your button workflow. But if you're more movie or documentary style oriented, I'm telling you, man, that top handle makes a huge difference. Coupled with the fact that you don't have to beef it up with a cage. If I didn't already own the A7S III, I probably would have gone the FX3. From a cinema perspective, it's a much better value, all-in-one package movie camera. And seeing as how I use the A7S III 90% of the time as a video camera, it's nice to have that included audio interface because I can attach my XLR mic directly to it. Or slim it down, not use anything at all, or even attach a wireless Sony mic and start vlogging with it if I want to. Again, I just like how the FX3 is super adaptable. So let me know in the comments down below, is the FX3 right for you? Wait, hold on, no, that's not the right question. Are you right for the FX3? Let me know in the comments down below. So I did spend a little bit of my own pocket money to get some epic sample footage for you guys. So if you guys enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please do me a favor, stick around and listen to what my sponsor Squarespace has to say. Believe it or not, it really does help the channel and allow me to keep making more of these helpful and unique content for you guys. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform to create beautiful websites. No coding knowledge whatsoever. Perfect for people like me because I just want to make YouTube videos for you guys and not have to worry about coding my entire website. Simply just select one of their templates to get started. Every aspect is easily customizable with their drag and drop feature. Whether you're in need of a portfolio, an e-commerce store, or even a simple blog, design it with Squarespace. Use my link down below to test it out, and when you're ready to launch your first website or domain, use my code JasonVong to save 10% off. Guys, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.